So if you aren't familiar with our channel, what we like to do is a brief recap of what happened in the episode, especially if an episode's several hours long, which this one was just over 6 hours.
Yeah.
We do our best to do just a quick recap in case you had to watch it over multiple sittings, in case you missed a detail. We'll do a recap for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we will talk about our reactions to the episode. So we also pull that recap out entirely. So if you're watching just the recap itself, click the link below. You can go to our whole video discussion. And again, we want to hear what you thought of the episode. So let us know in the comments your thoughts. I'm pretty sure I'm first half, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just
what if I was like, I'm first half?
Yeah. Tickets or the sandwiches. All that to say, let's talk about what frickin' happened on episode 4 of EXU Calamity. And if you remember this episode, the previous episode ended with Laren casting Blight on the Tree of Names. It's sundering up the seam with fire. It's splitting open with Vespin stepping through into our world, and presumably the Lord of the Hells, Asmodeus, not far behind. This episode opens up with a time stop spell going out, and additionally a spell known as Disjunction. It's an old 3E spell that basically disassembles and destroys your magical items. So Britain has every person roll a wisdom saving throw, and if they can pass the check, I think it was a 20, maybe a 23, I can't remember. If they can pass the check, they get to keep that magical item. If they fail the check, they take a lot of damage, I think 25, 26 points of damage per item, and the item is permanently destroyed, gone. So everybody rolls. Some were more lucky than others. I think Nidus only had one item get destroyed. Paisha had like almost every item except for her staff get destroyed, which we found out after the fact that if the staff had been destroyed, it would have been like an atomic bomb that killed everyone.
Yeah.
Of note, Xerxes only has his shield destroyed, and then his sword, his Holy Avenger, doesn't get destroyed. It corrodes into nothingness, similar to the solar bow from episode 1. Laren, I think, has her Ring of Protection destroyed, but is mostly okay. And then Sam's character, Loquacious, fails every single item except for one that he rolls a natural 20 on. It is the portable spell slot that Laren had gifted him in the previous episode. He rolls a natural 20. It's the only item that saves. From this explosion, Paisha's knocked out. I think Loquacious and Nidus are close to being knocked out. But right after this disjunction spell, there's also this, Brennan calls it a fireball. We don't know if it's an actual fireball spell or just like the explosion of the portal opening. But essentially what happens is everyone takes like 70 to 80 fire and force damage. It knocks out Nidus, knocks out Xerxes, knocks out Loquacious. Laren gets knocked outside of the room through the door, outside of the time stop spell, and Paisha is killed. She actually dies from this spell. What then it goes from there is we see Laren is going to, outside of the time stop spell, she basically is like, well, my friends are dead, and she's going to dimension door away to a private viewing room where she's seeing like a feed of what's happening on Dwemer, her little automaton or automaton robot who's down in the room. And this is all happening under a second. Basically, we have death saving rolls that go out. Loquacious is going to fail. He's going to roll 2 6s and also takes a death save or death fail from the damage as well. Loquacious dies. Nidus is eventually going to succeed and be stable, but still at 0 hit points. Xerxes, oddly enough, comes back. It seems like something has brought him back with 3 hit points. And what he sees is, looking through the seam of the portal to the 9 Hells, presumably, or maybe the in-between space, he sees this horrific form of Asmodeus he's able to see through the chest to see this heart with a humanoid in agony within the heart, like wreathing in pain and crying out. And Xerxes reaches out, and somehow his spirit form it's like out-of-body experience, reaches out and touches this figure who is burning, is in agony, and this figure in being touched sees Xerxes and says basically, I'm scared, like I'm hurting. And Xerxes, being the freaking amazing, caring, redemptive paladin that he is basically like, don't be scared, like I'm going to take care of you, you're okay, and pulls this figure through and basically pulls the true form of Asmodeus with this golden face and red hair, the pre-corrupted version, into their world. And he decides to continue his atonement spell, his cleansing touch on Asmodeus, casts it. It should have worked. Asmodeus is like, what's going on? What's supposed to happen? And he's like, why isn't this working? Like, don't you remember like who you were before you became the Lord of the Hells? And he's like, I think I do. And so Xerxes is kind of like, well, why isn't this working? Like, why aren't you being atoned? And Asmodeus, this is at the 55-minute timestamp. You need to go watch this again. Asmodeus says, I think I know what's going on. You tried to resurrect Evandrin and it didn't work because he wasn't really dead. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, you're trying to atone me, but I didn't do anything wrong. And his voice drops an octave and he stabs, in this moment, he stabs Xerxes. I know, bro. Stabs Xerxes through the heart, killing him, revives him. Him and Xerxes have this moment of Xerxes like screaming like, no, you're wrong. Remember who you were, like, remember like the good side of you, basically. And Asmodeus is like, hey, idiot, this is really me. Like, I'm super evil, in case you haven't noticed. And he has this awesome kind of semi-monologue about how much he despises mortals and how back in the day, there's a perception that the betrayer gods hate the prime deities, but that's not true. These are his siblings. They all came here together. Who he really hates are the mortals who, as he puts it, turned his siblings against him. And Britton has this amazing line where he basically says, my only heartbreak is that once I've collected all of the souls of the mortals and my prime deity siblings, once I've collected all of their souls into my pit, I will only have eternity to torment them and punish them, basically. And then he rips the skin off of Xerxes' skull, killing him again, presumably revives him again. Xerxes wants to cast Resilient Sphere on himself, and Asmodeus 9th level counterspells it, then crushes him into the ground and breaks his spine and kills him a third time. And basically is like, yeah, you're dead. Like, I'm going to now ruin your world. And in this moment, Zartaza, the Erinyes, who had gotten the blood from Xerxes in a previous episode, is there as well. And Asmodeus grabs her by the throat, crushes her into the mace of the Black Crown, one of the arms of the betrayer, and basically says to Xerxes' spiritual form, this is here if you decide you want to still be around, if you want to stay alive, this is here for you, but just know the cost of it. Xerxes passes on to the astral plane, sort of this in-between, this limbic space before going on to the afterlife, and he sees Evandrin, and Evandrin's kind of like, oh, did Laren send you here? And Xerxes is like, not exactly. And Evandrin's like, no, like, you couldn't have died. Like, and he's like, okay, well, we can fix this. We can solve this. Like, we'll figure something out. And Xerxes knows that Evandrin's been locked away here for several years, that there's really no hope for him to, most importantly, save their son, Elias, and that if Elias is to be saved from the impending doom, the only option is to pick up this mace of the Black Crown and to return to life. Him and Evandrin have this very sweet moment of Evandrin just basically saying, hey, your heart for redemption, for believing the good in others, it's not a flaw, it's something beautiful, and I worship that in you. Really great conversation. And he grabs the mace and returns to the mortal realm. These goat horns growing out of his skull and his armor becoming charred. And while this is happening, by the way, Laren is watching on the video feed from Dwemer Asmodeus talking to Vespin, and Asmodeus is like, hey, get the whole band together. And Vespin's like, oh, they're all dead, by the way. Like, these guys all killed them. And he's like, all right, whatever. Here's your job. You need to revive Raushan and Kamort, the two primordials who are sealed beneath Mount Yagora, the only two primordials who were never killed. Your job is, as the city's dock, is to release them from their bonds and to have them join us in the war against the prime deities, and more importantly, Vasselheim. So he dimension doors away. We see him stepping through to Gordranus, the newly built capital of the betrayers in Wildmount. And we hear him say to another betrayer god, brother, what do you say we go destroy Vasselheim tonight? And turns back to Vespin and says, hey, get it done. Revive the primordials. So he leaves. Xerxes comes back, basically says to Vespin, who Vespin sees him as a fellow fiend, and is basically like, get out of here, like, let me do my stuff. And he's about to leave until he decides, you know what, I haven't learned my lesson quite yet on trying to atone super evil dudes. So he does cleansing touch on Vespin. This one succeeds. Vespin's face grows back and immediately grabs the mace, basically says, this is a bad contract, let me revise it and tweak it, and basically tweaks the infernal runes that are circulating this contract around the mace to not go into effect until dawn, which is a couple of hours away. And basically is like, you have till dawn to do what you need to do. Go back to the Hall of Prophecy, to the original Carwin, the original person who was declared mad. That's who you need to talk to. And Xerxes immediately cast Revivify on Loquacious. He lay on hands on Nidus, and then he's like, I have no other spell slots. I can't bring back Patia. But Loquacious has his one item that was never destroyed, the level 3 spell slot that he gives to Xerxes, who then uses it to revive Patia in a freaking awesome moment. The band is back together. Sarret, meanwhile, I don't mean this first have to be so long, but 6-hour episode. Sarret, meanwhile, does make it back to his home. Maya and Kier are both there, and he tells them, hey, like, he gives them the runes of recall and is like, hey, you're going to go away for a while. And they're freaking out. They're like, is everything okay? And he's like, yeah, everything's going to be fine. But his ring of honor that glows when someone's lying is glowing in front of them. And they're like, why is your ring glowing, Dad? And it's just a real, like, in the feels moment. And he's like, oh, it glows when danger's near, so you got to go. And Travis has this amazing moment where he says, remember, I'll always have my eye on you. And then he crushes the rune of recall in their hands, and they disappear, going to wherever Clear Eye is, his wife. Looking around the home, realizing he was never there, never present, he actually sets fire to his office and burns down his home, and knows that it's time to face what's coming. And he heads back to the Meridian Labyrinth, where everyone gets back together. And they're like, all right, what do we do now? So they go to the Hall of Prophecy. They basically deactivate the runes around Carwin's bed. We find out that the oracles were never crazy. They were just declared crazy because they were giving prophecy that was freaking terrifying. And Carwin basically then gives them a new prophecy, basically saying, if the primordials, Kamort and Rashan, rejoin the betrayers, if this first step of the plan is successful, all hope is lost. Exandria will never see the dawn of hope, will never see the calamity end, basically. And they all realize, okay, what do we do about this? And Laren realizes, I have an invention, the Astral Layrite, that I was going to use to move cities to different planes. What if I use that to move our primordials out of Exandria forever? And so that becomes the new plan. They all have their different tasks of where they want to go to basically help save as many people as possible. And so they all split up. And that is the first half of this amazing episode. So, Will, my friend, take us home with the incredible second half.
Yeah. Good job, by the way. All right. So the second half, we pick up first with Patia, who has made her way to her grandfather's statue. And she's basically thinking about everything she saw from the Tree of Names vision and just the cycle of selfishness that all led to this moment. Like not only her own selfishness, the selfishness of Vespin and all those people, but also dating back to the Gaudrishari and her grandfather. And as she's thinking about this, she levitates up to the model Avalier that is held up in the statue and actually breaks off the Librarium Incantatum, the portion that represents that. She then takes that portion and her orb, which contains basically all of her knowledge, all of the notes. You know, basically it's like a condensed history essentially in this orb, all the relevant information that she's learned. And she teleports that to Saret's daughter. And as she's doing this, Brennan asks her, you know, like in your mind, what like happened with your parents or something to that effect. And she's like, you know, I don't think she really thought about it. And so Brennan then shares this memory with her, or one where she's just a small girl and her grandfather seemingly modifies both their memories and says it'll be easier this way. And having that memory kind of revealed to her, she like tries to grab her orb back before she teleports it, but it's too late.
Yeah.
And so she teleports that away. And it's then that Loris shows up walking out of the, you know, nearby Septariat door or whatever. And he's like, what's going on? And Paige is like, you know what's going on. Like, and she just tells him to F off, basically.
It's awesome.
And he's like, all right, you know, what's going on? And Aladrin, the Wise, also comes out, or Aladamir, sorry. And he's like, is everything okay? And after a brief conversation with Paisha, kind of filling him in, he's like, we must inform the Herald, like Loquacious must tell the people to divert their arcane energy into the etheric net, you know, to save the cities, like sacrifice themselves so that Avalier can survive. And Paisha's like, oh, don't worry, Quay, like he's already on it. He knows what to say. And with that, she takes her leave, but not before telling Loris that, hey, you're going to die tonight, and you're going to die to a traitor to yourself and Avalier. So then we cut to Nidus and Loquacious, and Nidus is dropping off Loquacious at the Herald's Tome in order to give this speech. But then Nidus himself heads back to the Golden Scythe, and there he tells Bodrin and Alessander, he's like, hey, come with me. We got to help the people of the city, like get our ships, evacuate the civilians, you know, we got work to do. And they're like,
forget the gold.
Yeah. He's like, forget the gold.
Troves of gold.
Yeah.
Like thousands of gold.
They're like, forget the gold, forget like the ruling elite, like go help the people. And Bodrin says, like, as you will, Guildmaster. But as soon as Nidus turns his back, he stabs him through the back. And he's like, you've lost your way. You've lost your mind. And then in one turn, Nidus, like, bonus actions, quicken spells, holds person, and then just unleashes his attacks on him. They're all auto crits, and his dragon, Shakurzan, also attacks him and kills him in one round. And he has this, you know, he was just stabbed in the back. So his like, how do you want to do this? Is him just like slowly plunging his sword into the front. It's like, you know, not being a coward about it. And with seeing all that, Alessander's like, yep, I'm on it. Like, will do. Yeah. He's like, and we should send one of the ships to the university to get the children as well, right? And he's like, yes, perfect. So they're off doing that. And Nidus continues on and goes to the Hall of Constructs, where he sends all but 2 of the taxmen to go help the city, like go help fight these devils that are fighting all across the city. And it's when he's here that he noticed some of the engines have been tampered with. Specifically, one of the Hodmedads that was in, I think, episode 1. One of the Hodmedads at the party was clearly messed with. So he sees how that happened. And he also sees that some of the taxmen engines have also been tampered with. And he kind of puts 2 and 2 together because there are 4 that have been tampered with. And he's like, these must be the ones in the Meridian Labyrinth. And kind of when he's putting that together, all these Hodmedads and Canalfi, or not Hodmedads, all these Canalfi like kind of emerge from within the Hall of Constructs. They've been like waiting here to kind of ambush. They're probably the ones that tampered with the engines. And so Nidus finds himself surrounded, but we hear this roar, and the Sphinx from earlier comes out and basically like decimates all these Canalfi with his roar. And he's like, I think my debt's paid, and basically saves Nidus. So then we kind of transition back to the Herald's Tome, where we have Loquacious. He finds his assistant Arya, basically immediately begins prepping to address the people. But suddenly a portal opens up in front of him, this like majestic golden portal, and through it he can see the Feywild, and also Elminor, the High War Queen of the Burning Vale, matriarch of the Sealy Court. And she speaks to him, but she's also speaking to all of the Fae, like across Exandria, all at the same time, and he like realizes this. And she's basically saying, like, come, my children, like, you have to get off this world. Like, come back to the Feywild. I wish I could help everyone, but I can only help, my children or whatever. And Loquacious is like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, but if you ask me to come, I'll come. And then he immediately casts Gift of Gab, which basically takes back the last thing you say. And he says, I'm not coming. I love you, but I love someone else more. And Elminor is like, understands, and the portal closes. So then he goes back preparing for his speech, but Loris of the Weaver's Mask shows up and is like, hey, Harold, you got to give this speech, tell people they need to divert their energy to save the city. And Quay's like, yeah, that was the plan already, for sure. You want to stay and watch the speech? And Loris, like sits down and he's like sending messages and stuff. But Quay then casts Wall of Force around him. And so now he's trapped and is basically like pounding on the wall, like, what are you doing? And it's then that Quay basically launches into his monologue addressing the city. And it's an amazing monologue. I'm not going to read it word for word here in the sake of saving time, but he basically says the replenishment is canceled. The wizards of the city have failed you. He then transforms into Aladamir the Wise and tells the people of the city, like, run. Like, use your magic, save yourselves, just get out of here. But if you're a part of the ruling elite, if you're a part of the administration, you have to stay. Like, stay, fight, go down with the ship. And then he turns back into himself and basically gives a little heartfelt message to each member of the Ring of Brass, culminating with his message to Laren, basically saying, like, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And then he launches into an ad read for the Market of Wonders. So it's a really funny little transition there.
Yeah.
Finally ending with "See you later," and Brennan's like, no roll required. That was a natural 20. We then cut to Kath Moira, where Xerxes and Sarah. Xerxes is going to look for his son, and Sarah is tailing him, unbeknownst to Xerxes. So they head there. He heads to Nidus' brother's house, which is where his son is. Finds his son, and his son is scared of him at first because he's got goat horns and basically looks like a demon now. But he's like, just look in my eyes, like, it's me. And he gives his son his journal and is like, all the questions you have, like, all the information you need is in there. Like, take this. And also, he rode Tempest to get here. One of Tempest's feathers kind of fell off and landed in the basket that Elias was holding. And, basically says he loves him and, to get out of the city, and flies away. And Sarah sees all of this. But as Xerxes is flying back, Cathmora is also under attack and by demons and stuff. And so he shouts, lay down your weapons in Infernal, because he is this champion of Asmodeus, essentially. And they actually listen. So the demons that are attacking Cathmora lay down their weapons. And that enables the druids to get more people evacuated. They're opening portals and basically saved a lot more people by doing that. Then we cut to the Astral Layrite, where Laren has arrived and realizes that what she wants to do in kind of getting rid of these primordials is possible. It's an apogee solstice, so she could banish them, but she doesn't know what would happen to the city if she did that. Paisha arrives and she's like, I saw the names of the primordials when I was touching the Tree of Life. Like, there's hundreds of names for them. I know them. Together, we can make this work. So they have a half hour basically to redo Laren's entire life's work. The rest of the Ring of Brass also converge on this spot as Laren and Paisha are working away. Alarms ringing out all over the city. We are like rapidly approaching the final docking of Avalier and Kath Moira. Luis asks Brennan how long till sunrise, because this contract that Blake mentioned activates then, and he's like, it's sunrise is 5:45. It's probably like 5:33 right now. And Xerxes then tells everyone like what's happening with him and asks Nidus like, hey, don't let me become something I'm not. And Nidus is like, brother, you'll always be you. I'll make sure. So now we cut to 18 seconds before docking, 3 rounds and the door to the Layrite explodes. In comes Vespin Chloros and the 4 taxmen. We roll initiative. So, again, just to kind of run through this fight kind of quickly, Nidus first tells everyone the capabilities of these taxmen, since he, helped build them. He's very familiar with them and kind of gives them clues to how to fight them. And the fight is essentially the entire Ring of Brass trying to hold back Vespin and the taxmen while Laren / Pasha continue work on creating this Layrite spell. So every turn of these 3 rounds, Laren is rolling an Arcana check to progress. And one of the first ones she does is she's told, okay, you have a choice to make. You can either ensure that the primordials are successfully banished, like 100%, or you can minimize like the damage that this is going to do to the city. And she decides, I got like Avalier be damned. I got to make sure that these, primordials are taken care of. Combat's continuing. At one point, Xerxes is going for an attack on Vespin, but he takes some opportunity attacks from taxmen on the way, and he's knocked unconscious and falls down. Nidus, having promised him that, I will make sure you don't turn, takes his turn and readies his action at the end to be like, if I fall unconscious, I'm going to fall and plunge my sword into my brother's heart, Xerxes' heart. And that does happen. And so he does plummet onto Xerxes. And we basically get to the point where there's one final round. We need to make it to Laren's last turn for her last Arcana check. And Quay is like, all right, to kind of ensure that she gets this turn, I'm going to use my action to hold a healing word on Laren. So he does that. And in the final round, Vespin casts Power Word Kill on her. And there's a whole lot that happens here. There's opportunity attacks, counterspell attempts, silvery barbs. Ultimately, what happens, though, is the counterspells fail, but Brennan gives Travis, a reaction to Vespin casting Shield on his opportunity attack. And it's a straight roll, no advantage, no disadvantage. And he rolls a natural freaking 20.
It's insane.
And he kills Vespin on the spot. So the Power Word Kill does not go off. And Laren is able to make that last Arcana check, do the last tinkering that she needs, and basically set this spell off. I forgot to mention, she does take some damage, and that healing word held by Loquacious, like she would have been unconscious, but since he held that spell, she basically never even fell unconscious. And so she's able to successfully do it with a final Arcana check of a 32, which she rolled really well. Plus, Brennan gave her extra inspiration from that Loquacious spell healing her. Is she the woman that doomed the world, or the one that saved it? And instead of releasing the primordials from their prison, they are banished across the plains of Exandria and basically obliterated. What comes next, Brennan says, the players don't really see, but it's important for them to know. Ships are ferrying people off of Avalier to safety. Tempest, called back to his feather, has made his way back to Alias and has Alias on his back and flies through a portal into the Astral Sea, where he leaps into the arms of Evandrin, reunited at last. Xerxes does not take Nidus's way out. He's given, even though Nidus did stab him, he's given, one last opportunity. And he says that he knows there's redemption and salvation for everyone. So he returns to the living, and his body begins to shift now that we've reached sunrise. His body immolates. Nidus, in these final moments, receives a sending from his brother, asking if he's okay. He says he's fine. All is well. They reminisce about their time as children. Pasha remembers her grandfather telling her, like, what's more important, Avalier or family? And he's like, we built Avalier, we can build it again. The dreamer matters more than the dream. There are many dreams to come. Sarret gets a sending stone call from his, wife and kids, and he apologizes for never being there. And he promises, like, I'm going to return to you. But the energy of this spell going off kind of cuts out the signal of the sending stone. Laren and Quay run, embrace, basically like profess their love again for each other, share a kiss, whatever time is left, they'll spend it together. And as everything is crumbling around them, Sarret is faced with the final decision. Does he accept his fate, or does he attempt to keep his promise to his family? So he looks for a way out. With the last roll of the campaign, DC 30, with an inspiration from Nidus and Quay's Pact of the Boon if he needs it, he hits a 31. So he rushes through the collapsing tunnels and just barely makes it out. And the Ring of Brass endures. And basically the Calamity sets off from there. And that's essentially where the episode ends. Ooh.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so that's what happened in episode 4.
Bit of a long one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about. If you're watching just the recap, click the link below to see our whole discussion. Will, this might be the best thing I've ever seen.